So we started discussion on Moore's law and its implication. So we'll go into little details about heat constant and power constraints because that's the reason we are moving to multi-core architectures, right? So we'll start with this concept of Moore's law, and these are the two references I have used. So Moore's law, yesterday we discussed that the density of IC or chips is increasing every year and a half or 2 years. So it's a doubling, right? So number of transistors we can pack into same area is almost doubling. It has direct implication on the computing power. It means the computing power is doubling almost every year and a half and 2 years. Okay, and people have been predicting that this will not go on for very long, but technology really has advanced. The VLSI technology improved so much that every year and a half or 2 years, we are able to get packed higher number of transistors. It means that transistor size is reducing and we have almost reached 5 nanometer width. Okay, it's called 5 nm technology. And most of the chipsets that we use today, that is even something that was released few days back, uses about 7 nanometer or 10 nanometer technology. So it means that more number of transistors are getting packed. Now, what is the implication of that? That we'll see today. Now, these two curves we have seen is starting from 1970s. There is an almost linear curve that we see today, wherein number of transistor per chip is really increasing. Okay, almost doubling every year and a half and 2 years. Okay, all right, we'll move on. And so current technology, as we discussed, is between 5 nanometer and 20 nanometer. It means that some uh, companies use 20 nanometer technology, wherein others, most recent ones use 5 nanometer technology. Okay, the recently released Tiger Lake processor that will come into laptops will use 10 nanometer technology. Okay, uh, so we have today more than close to 50 to 60 billion transistors in a chip. Okay, and that's fantastic, right? And but question is that how long this will go on? Well, people have been predicting it will stop sometime or other, but last year, or even this year, we can see that same trend continues. It means that we can still pack more number of transistors in a chip. Okay, but how? What is what is limiting factor then? What is it troubling us now? Okay, we'll see the impact. So if you look at this uniprocessor performance or single processor performance, okay, when you compare it with the VAX 11 870 computer, which happened sometimes in 1970s, you can see that it's almost linear increase till year 2000, say 3 or 2002, and after that increase is slightly flattened out, reduction in uh, increase in terms of performance. Okay, and one thing we can see is that after say 2002, the clock rate remains the same around 3 gigahertz. So clock rate is not going up. Okay, it means that number of clock cycles remains almost the same. Okay, yet performance is increasing, right? So so we'll have to see that what is the reason for flattening of this curve. So flattening is not too deep, but still, I mean, there is a reduction in terms of improvements. Although, okay, now there is a classical paper that says that there is no free lunch for software engineers. It means that whatever code somebody has written, okay, whatever code somebody has written during this period up to 2003 or 4, performance or the performance of that algorithm was increasing because computing speed was increasing. Okay, number of instructions the processor can execute were kind of doubling every year, every 2 years, so the performance was naturally increasing. But after some time, now we see that now programmers have to do much more tasks if they really want improvement in performance because the clock speed is almost the same. Okay, now we'll see why. Now let's look at the clock rate trend and the power trend. Now when we say power, it is not CPU power. It is the electrical power. Okay, the power that a chip consumes. Okay, and we see that the clock rate for this all only for Intel processor has gone up to 3600 megahertz or 3.6 gigahertz, and then it's almost there. Okay, then we see that chip consumes electrical power. Chip consumes electrical power because transistors have concept of power in or the current in and current out. Okay, so essentially there will be some capacitor. So charging of capacitor and discharging of capacitor requires current flow. Okay, so as a result of that, we see that power as the clock speeds were increasing. Okay, the power dissipation or power required to drive the chip was also increasing. Then there is we can see there is a trend towards reduction in power. Okay, the reason for that is that the heat generation, because electrical circuit will have capacitor and as well as resistor, and more power consumption will generate more heat. Okay, and this was the problem, that the heat, it becomes too hot, then whole electrical circuit will stop working. So as a result of that, now people realize that we cannot increase the clock, because if we increase number of clocks, then rate at which the activities will be done will be much more, and there will be more consumption of power. Okay, at the same time, power cannot be, or heat cannot be handled efficiently, so we have to reduce the power consumption and keeping the clock rate same. So we'll look at this in more detail. Okay, note that clock rates are not increasing anymore. Although we always want the clock rates to be of higher speed, because faster clock means that your program will run faster in general. Because if the clock period is smaller and your instruction or your program takes certain number of instructions, uses certain number of instructions, and each instruction takes certain number of cycles, then we can say that if we reduce the clock period, then overall time of execution of program will reduce. But we cannot, there's no linear relationship here, because if we reduce the clock period, then of course the CPU can do lesser amount of work. Okay, because certain activities that you can do if the clock cycle is bigger, or the clock period is bigger, then you cannot do that with a smaller period. So there is no linear relationship. But yet, in general, we can say if we increase the clock speed, then your program execution becomes faster. So power dissipation, of course, is an important thing. And again, a lot of people have studied about what is correlation between power dissipation and heat. Okay, so there are some, in general, we can say if the power dissipation overall in the chip is higher, then heat dissipation will be more. But there is no very significant result which says that a part of chip that consumes more power is generally more heat. But in general, people have accepted that if you control power or power consumption, then you can control heat dissipation also. All right. Any question?
So,
Yeah. Any question? Yeah.
yes, sir, I had a question. So,
Yeah.
like you said, the main problem was heat, right?
Yes.
So, why don't we introduce something else? Like we can introduce liquid cooling or something, which are being introduced, I think,
Okay.
in some PCs.
Yeah, the people are doing everything to make sure. But if we continue, there was a curve which I have not shown here. if we continue to do the same thing as we are doing another say 3 4 years, you will heat generation will be significantly higher, which you cannot manage. So it's something like is they compare it with the heat generated by sun. Okay, so the quantum of the problem is much bigger than people can handle with normal cooling mechanisms.
Okay,
Okay,
sir. Thank you, sir.
all right. So power dissipation can, of course, be managed by multiple things. For example, wire length. Uh, I mean, you have transistors or different part or transistors, number of transistor making components, and these components are interconnected with wires, and wires also generate heat. Okay. Now, if we reduce, okay, that's one aspect. Second is that what is the impact of reducing clock cycle? Very, very low. Okay, one impact, of course, I mean, we discuss is heat. Second impact is that CPU cannot do enough work. Third impact is that there is some communication time in the wire. Okay, the wire is sending a signal from one point to another point, and then that communication has to be over within a cycle. Okay, and then if the wire length, if the sorry, if the the clock cycle is too small or clock period is too small, then the communication will not be over. So that is also one limitation. Another limitation is that pipeline depth. We'll study that later, that what are the instruction pipelines, and if instruction cycle or sorry instruction sorry cycle clock period is too small, then we cannot efficiently use a pipeline. That we'll study later. Okay. Now another impact of having high power consumption is that your battery will be consumed higher, or you will need more electricity, right? And electricity is expensive. That's first thing. Secondly, the battery is very important, right? And most of the devices that we use, either laptop or mobile, especially mobile devices, if you consume more power, then the whole device functionality will be impacted, right? If you have mobile whose battery cannot support even 1 hour of usage, then you'll say, oh, mobile is of no use to me or little use to me, right? Uh, so the power becomes really, really bottleneck, the power consumption, right? So the whole idea of the whole technology is moving in such a way that power reduction has to be there, and we'll have design chipsets and CPUs uh, in such a way that power consumption is controlled. And because that will also control heat, and that will also help us in better design of say mobile devices or devices. All right. So that's the reason that we cannot pack too many transistors within a chipset or within a processor. I will not say chipset again. I will say processor. Okay. We'll come to that even later. Uh, okay, this point we have already discussed. There lot of studies are conducted between heat generation within a chip. Sometimes we call it hotspots, because within a chip there are heat hotspots and the power consumption. Okay, so there are lot of research topic, lot of research has happened, and still people are studying that. But what people say is that in general we have to consume the less power. Okay, because both techniques, the heat management techniques and power management techniques, have a lot in common. So we'll focus largely on power management rather than on heat management. Now we see that we are moving. See, if you look at your mobile handset, right? Whatever mobile handset you're using today, excepting that feature phone, okay, which does not have graphics and which does not have, where you can't see, uh, say you cannot see YouTube or movies. So feature phones are the very lowest end of the phone, whose functionality is only around SMS and phone call. But apart from that, most of us use smartphones. Okay, and each smartphone, if you see inside, uh, it has is a multi-core device, right? It means that multiple processor units within a chipset. Okay, most of the phones have two core or four cores, which is quad core, and most of the laptops have chipset, which is quad core. Okay? So now it's interesting to find out why we cannot build a very large size processor with more transistor, more functionality, rather than we are moving a quad core or multiple core kind of architecture. Okay. Uh, so for example, Xeon processor, Haswell Xeon processor has 18 cores, and the most of the handset, as we discussed, have quad core. Okay. Now we have multiple cores, means that there is a parallelism, right? So your program that you have written has to be has to run on multiple processor. It means that your processor designing, the way you write processor now has to improve for making it to be executable on parallel multiple processors. It means that if you have studied the concept of threads, then essentially your program should be thread safe, or you should write program in such a way multiple parallel threads can be created which can run on multiple processor. All right, so now the question is that why do we need multiple cores? Now, one limit before that we need to understand is that for practical reasons of cooling, all computing hardware that are designed today are limited to 250 to 300 watts of power consumption. Okay? So this is the limit we have to keep in mind, and you can check all the processors that are coming out today, whether they are general purpose processor like for Intel that goes into laptop, etc., or it is embedded kind of processor that goes into, say, mobile phones or any device. You will see that maximum amount of power it can consume is about 200 watts, or say some consume over 300 watts. So this is the limitation that we have today. Okay, small break. Now you tell me the energy costs that make up for data center operating cost. You understand operating costs, right? Operating cost is the operation cost, the cost to run a data center. Once you have created data center, that is initial cost. Okay, there's a cost to build a data center. We're not talking about that. When we say operating cost of anything, like operating cost of your institute, right, is that the director gets some money per month to run the institute, pay salaries or whatever. Okay, so operating cost of a data center, in that we'll have to find out what is the percentage cost of energy. Now we understand data center, like a data center, like Google's data center will have at least 100,000 CPUs, at least 100,000, right? Now, of course, there are some with, close to a million processors in that. So what is the energy cost? Approximately 10%. When say energy cost, it means that electricity cost or cost of cooling and cost of basically using electrical power for whatever, all the operation. This is 10%, 20%, 30%, or 50%. Of course, answer is given in the next sheet. And what is the largest size of data center today? So answers are clearly the 50% expense that you make, say every day or every month, goes on energy management, energy cost. Okay, and that is the reason if you hear that somebody actually significant part of this cost is also in the cooling, because there's so much of heat is generated that it has to be cool, and that's the reason people have been trying to build data center in coldest part of the world, say Siberia and other places, right? Okay, or some parts of Russia. Okay, and data center, of course, is very, very big nowadays. It's more than 100,000 computers that are sitting inside. Okay, so now let's get back to power constraints. Look at the thermal design power. What is thermal design power? Okay, it's shown here in watts. This is thermal design power is actually at the time of design, you design systems for maximum power that it can consume. The maximum power. This is theoretical design. Okay. Uh, when you design, you have to see the upper limit, and the thermal design power is that upper limit. And in practical use, it power consumption will be surely less than that. Okay. So what we can see is that from 2000 beginning, power consumption has been going up. Now it has become almost steady around 250 watts for this particular chipset. Okay. Uh, okay. For NVIDIA, which is green in line, you can see it's around 250 watt. Okay, and for this new chipset, Xeon Phi, they initially started with almost like 300 watt. Now they've reduced it to 200 watt. Okay, so this collaborates with something that we discussed, the maximum power that most of the chipset are consuming in the range of 250 to 300 watt. Okay, let's move to the next one. Now let's see that what is the maximum number of instruction a uniprocessor can execute. Okay, uniprocessor, that is single processor. And we can see that G flop is gigabit, or sorry, giga, not giga, gigabit, but it's just simply giga, that 10 raised per 9 floating point operation per second. Okay, so we can see that this number, it means that how powerful the processors are becoming. Okay, we can see that it's almost reaching say 10,000 gigaflops. 10,000 giga floating point instruction per second. So this is kind of number of instruction processors are able to execute. Now this could be because of high clock speed. This could be because of pipelining or some or because of some other developments, right? So in general, we can see it's gone up significantly over time. Okay. Now let's take up the third curve, which says, so what is the number of floating point instruction you can execute per watt? Okay. And we can see that this number has gone up in the beginning, isn't it? Considering per watt power consumption. And then within that, how many instruction can be executed? And we can see it's almost flat now. Okay. Because, all the techniques people have done to reduce the power and then do more things. For example, one interesting technique that we'll see is the reduction of voltage. Okay, if you reduce the voltage, power consumption will be less. But how much voltage reduction you can do, that's another question. Look at the trend in power starting from 1985 to 2009. Of course, I mean, this one shows that the nanometer width of or transistor size, and it has come down from 1500 nanometer in 1985 up. Now it has gone down to say 5 nanometer that we discussed. It 45 was in year 2009. Now it has gone down to almost like 5 nanometer. So number of transistors in millions have gone up significantly. Now voltage, that supply voltage, right? Supply voltage was in the beginning 5 volts. Now it has come down to almost like 1 volt. Okay. Clock speed initially was slow, 16 megahertz. It has gone almost like say 100 times, right? More than 100 times? Yeah, 200 times in 2000 till 2009. And after that, it's almost like same. Power consumption has gone from 1 watt, just trivial in the beginning, now up to, almost like we discussed 250 to 300 watts. And then peak MIPS or million instructions per second has gone to 52,000 or 53,000. And then last row shows million instruction per watt. that has also gone significantly high. What does it mean? What does this chart really mean? That the technology has made tremendous improvement, right? For the same consumption of 1 watt, number of instructions is almost 100 times more today. Okay. However, and similarly, power consumption has gone 100 times more, and which is now reaching the limit. Okay. So, and the supply voltage has gone down from 5 volt to 1 volt, and people are realizing that we cannot further go down below this. And another trend that you see is the clock frequency is almost like same. Even today is around same 3300 or 3000 gigahertz, megahertz, or 3 gigahertz, or similar to this. Any question up to this point? Any question?
Sir,
Yeah.
sir, you mentioned that even like we are optimizing the uniprocessor itself. So in the uniprocessor, do we have threading?
Uniprocessor, you don't do threading. Generally, you don't do. The concept of threading has become more relevant when you can. We will study at the time when we'll study pipeline, what all we can do in uniprocessor architecture. But threading has become more relevant, when it became multiprocessor architecture and when you can run threads parallelly. We will come to this discussion much later because whole data part design is centered around these themes. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Okay, but in general, concept of I remember in Nokia when I was working, uh, sometimes in 2005, people started discussing now let's change our software to run it on multiple threads. I mean, multiple processors. So multi-threading programming let's do. So around that time, all over the world, when people realize that in mobile set they can't have single processor, they have to have multiple processors. So then people realize that we'll have to have multi-threading programming. Okay. We'll come to this question a little later as well. Okay, now let's see power constitutes of. In general, we can say now power is actually per unit time consumption of power, right? I mean, and if you multiply this by time, that you get energy. So we can say energy consumed within 1 minute is this much, or energy consumed within 1 second is so much watt. But per unit time, we calculate power. Okay, it consists of dynamic power and static power. Static power we also call as leakage power. Okay, this is the same thing. I should have written here in bracket leakage. No, dynamic power is because of what? Is because of charging and discharging, right? Because see, ultimately we have gates, and gates consist of transistors, and gates, and when we do something, let's assume when do calculation, then these states change, right? From 0 to 1 and 1 to 0. And that means that if 1 we represented as a high voltage and 0 is low voltage, obviously current will go into system to charge it to level 1. Okay, so more activities we have more dynamic power that will consume. Okay, and the simple formula that we can say is dynamic power. Now here we say approximated, or we sometimes we can use proportional to, but right now we use approximate to capacitance, overall capacitance of the chip. Okay, voltage square and frequency. Now frequency here is the clock frequency. Okay, and then we have leakage power. Whether you do any activity or no activity, uh, power from transistors will always, or any capacitor will always leak out. That we call a leakage current. Okay, and then leakage power is simple multiplication of supply voltage into leakage current. Now let's see how we can play with this and control overall power consumption, right? Okay. Now, of course, leakage power is becoming important, but focus has been on the dynamic power because leakage power people are able to control somehow. Okay. Uh, so let's look how to control dynamic power. We call it switching power or active power because it's because of the action, right? If there is no state change, then there won't be dynamic power. But if there is no state change or transistor state is not changing, then we are not doing anything. There's no computer. And when a computer is working, of course there is state change. Okay, so energy to switch gates from 0 to 1 and 1 to 0. And each gate has a capacitance C. So charge stored is CV. Energy stored, energy to charge or discharge in a capacitor is proportional to CV square. Now see here we are using in general for transistor wherein you consider the whole system, then you can treat this as also as a capacitance of the whole system or whole chip or part of the chip, right? Anyway you can use this formula. Okay, so now you notice that time to charge or discharge a capacitor is also proportional to or approximated to V, a supply voltage. Supply voltage is higher, then charging will be faster. Okay, so then we can say the dynamic power is approximated as A is activity, we'll come to that. C is overall capacitance. V is supply voltage times frequency. And frequency again is nothing but time to charge and discharge a capacitor is dependent on V. So we can say is proportional to dynamic power is proportional to V cube times V power 3 or V cube. Okay. Now here A is activity factor. How much activity chip is doing. Okay, a part of transistor switching, a part are not switching, then accordingly we'll have to take A. If nothing is happening, then A may be close to 0. Okay. If a lot of switching is happening or a lot of state change is happening, then activity factor will be close to 1. Okay, so we can define this activity factor. We are not going to detail now, but let's stop at this definition of A. Now let's play with CV square F. The question is that how can you reduce the dynamic power? A, activities, can you control activities? Can you control activity of a computer, say your laptop? Can you control that switching? Can you reduce the switching of transistors externally as a user? Or can OS do this? Any answer?
So we do have options in the OS to like reduce the background processes.
Perfect, perfect. Okay, say very right. And there are a lot of things computer OS does, right? For example, there's a concept of hibernation, right? When you just nowadays nobody switches off the laptop. Okay, as soon as you close the laptop, then whole laptop goes into hibernation mode. Okay, when you are not to see disk is supposed to run all the time, hard disk. This is a magnetic, it is a rotating, it is a mechanical power. Huge amount of power is wasted in rotating the disk. Okay, if can you control the disk rotation by intelligent data fetching mechanism? Of course, yes, we do caching. There are multiple level of caches, right? And we can organize this disk in such a way that overall spinning of disk is minimal. Okay, say for example, when you are not using a laptop, when a laptop is on, then after some time screen can go off, right? We all of us have this feature built in. Why? because screen takes a lot of power, and then we can reduce activity. Okay, similarly, when we design program, we can do programming in such a way that activity factor can be reduced. Okay, similarly, when compiler is compiling and converting higher level instruction to lower level instruction, it can also look at which instruction, what should be sequence of instruction that should be generated such that there is a minimum power is consumed. So there are a number of ways this activity factor can be controlled. Okay, let's come to the second. How can you reduce the capacitance per transistor or overall capacitance of system? Okay, one question. The Moore's law says that transistor size is reducing. That's the reason we can pack more transistor. By reduction of transistor size, are we increasing the capacitance or reducing the capacitance? Any answer?
So the
Okay, we are
smaller,
reducing.
so the smaller the
Right.
transistor, the lesser the capacitance.
Yes. Okay. But another answer could be number of, but per transistor capacitance is reducing, but number of transistors that we are using in general is also increasing. So overall capacitance is function of both, right? In some sense, it's reducing on one hand per transistor, but these you are packing more transistor and they are coming into the play, right? So there is some combination of the two. Okay, but in general, we can't do much. It's a technology dependent activity. Okay. How about voltage? Can we design a chipset that can work at various levels of voltage? Yes. Nowadays, most of the chipset that we have uses various level of voltage, supply voltage. I mean, when you have done electrical engineering design, possibly you would have done with 5 volt as a standard thing, right? We assume that's a constant supply voltage, but that is not so today. Your processor uses number of voltage in either a step or continuous way. It can and also change the frequency, clock frequency to manage power. We'll see that. Okay, static power is leakage power, and noise is approximated as voltage into leakage current. Now, this P leak or power leakage power increases with the number of transistors on chip. Okay, according to Moore's law. However, there are methods to control it. Leakage power can be controlled by use of material apart from silicon. So there are a number of gallium arsenide or something is coming. I don't know because I have not studied about it. But in general, you can find out from literature, eye leakage is being controlled. Okay, hence research or focus has been towards the dynamic power side. Okay, so I will not spend more time. So we have studied this, that we can reduce the capacitance, that's one thing. Reduce voltage. Okay. Now, if you reduce voltage by 0.7 from 1 volt to reduce it to 0.9, then dynamic power will be what? The quadratic reduction in energy consumption, right? It will be 0.9 into 0.9 into 0.9. Okay, so it means that by small reduction in V, we can reduce power significantly. Now, this is the most effective way of managing power. And second most effective way is, of course, reduce the frequency. If you know, most of our laptops don't do 100% of work all the time, right? The CPU is not busy all the time. If you look at overall CPU power available to you and what we use is not even, I would think, 0.05 or something like that, right? It means that we are never using, and most of the time we are not using the computer at the maximum capacity or the maximum limit for which it's designed. Okay, then why not reduce the speed? Many of our tasks, for example, may not require high speed, like video conferencing that we are doing now, may not require very high because screen change is not there. It's not same as watching a movie, right? So, or playing high level game or video game. So I don't need very high clock speed. So clock speed can reduce for this kind of activity or this kind of application. And of course, we have discussed this that we can reduce the activity. So don't, and at hardware level also we can see, don't switch gates unnecessarily. If the part of CPU is not being used, just don't switch it on. Okay. Uh, okay. All right. Are you able to hear me? Hello?
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right. Okay. So these two things we have studied. Uh, Reduce supply voltage, frequency of course, and activity. So there are a number of ways. First, monitor. For example, in chip we can have thermal sensors. Okay, and whenever sensor and CPU is continuously reading output from sensor, and then when it crosses, the value crosses a certain threshold, it triggers some action, right? So it's very simple. So every CPU that we have has large number of thermal sensors in different parts of the chip. Okay. Now the technique that we frequently use is called dynamic voltage frequency scaling, DVFS. Okay. It means that change the voltage and frequency at the runtime. Okay. So this point we have already discussed. Okay. All these points we have discussed, that systems are designed for peak performance, which is not always needed. So we can always reduce frequency and the voltage. Okay. Now look at this table here. So we can see that there are three processors. Pentium 3, then Transmeta 5400 and Intel Exascale. The frequency is between 300 to 1000 megahertz. That is up to 1 gigahertz. And we can change this frequency at the step of 50. It means that we can have 300, 350, 400 up to 1000. And then when there was further progress, then the voltage, the frequency range was 200 megahertz to 700 megahertz. The step was 33. Okay. And then of course in X scale between 50 megahertz to 800 megahertz, step of 50. Now look at the voltage. Voltage range is between 0.9 and 1.7 with step of 0.1. It means that we can have 0.9 as supply voltage or 1 volt as supply voltage, or 1.1 up or 1.2 up to 1.7. And here in Transmeta, we have supply voltage of 1.1 up to 1.6, and this change in the voltage can be done continuously. It means it can be 1.15, 1.16 or whatever. Okay. Similarly, in X scale, supply voltage varies from 0.7 to 1.65, and this can be varied continuously, depending on the requirement. All right. Sorry. Okay. And similarly, now these two gives a number of instructions. How much? Say 3400 million instructions per second at 34 watt. And then similarly for X scale is 800 million instructions per second and 9 watt. All right. So we'll now come to the point here that voltage now, supply voltage can be changed in a continuous fashion. Now look at other thing. Now it means that, okay, and frequency, for example, can change from 800 to 50 or something. All right. So take example that if a clock is running at 1 gigahertz and when we reduce it to 200 megahertz, okay, it reduces energy by 30 times. All right. And now you can calculate this using the formula above. Okay. But when you reduce the frequency by 1/5, okay, 1 gigahertz 200, number of, your program, it means that you are running less number of cycles per second. It's by 5 times, right? It's 5 times slower. So your program in general will be 5 times slower. Okay. So it means that now if you put 5 processors in parallel, okay, instead of one powerful processor, and they run them at 200 megahertz speed, then you are going to use 1/6 of the energy. Okay. Now what we have done, we have reduced the frequency. Also, we have reduced the voltage, and because of this quadratic relationship, we have got 30x factor reduction in power. This whole aim is to control the power and then run these things in parallel. Okay, so it means that you are reducing the energy consumption by 1/6, and that's the reason now technology is moving towards multiple core. Okay, all right, please go through the slide set again when you get time, and please try to understand the concept, why we are going towards multiple core. So we use this DVFS technique into mobile devices, okay, and advanced laptops. All right, so let's move ahead. What are the other ways of reducing activity? Hibernation mode of OS that we have already discussed. It means as soon as you know, rather than shutting off the computer, just close the laptop cover or screen or fold your screen. Then computer senses that you are not going to work. It will save the state of the machine into hard disk. Okay, and then switch off the power. And as soon as you open it up, it will sense it, sensor will sense it and bring the state back. Now hibernation can be done in some parts of the computer, the disk or display that we have already discussed, and OS can of course do a lot of things smartly. Okay, all right. So the motivation for moving towards a multi-core processor is essentially about the heat and the power consumption, and how, because we cannot continue to create more and more powerful processors, and so we are moving towards a multi-core processor that will require programmers to write program in such a way or application in such a way that can be exploited over multi-core processor. Another thing that we can use multiple core is that there can be multiple tasks. For example, your computer is doing multiple tasks, then some cores, different cores can run different activities or different tasks also. Okay. And that we have discussed earlier, that so from early 80s almost till beginning 2000, there was free lunch for software developers. It means that whatever program they wrote, it gave better performance year after year. but not anymore. Okay, because uniprocessor performance is now limited. Okay, there will be limited increase. Okay, because of the heat, right? I mean, if you continue this way, there is a nuclear reactor kind of heat you will have, and further, if you continue this way, then you will have heat generated by sun. So what we are doing is essentially we are moving towards parallelism, such that heat can be or power can be managed. So there is no free lunch for software developers. They need to work harder to do better programming that can be exploited over multi-core or multiprocessor if they want speed up. Chart shows essentially how transistor, the top one shows the Moore's law. Okay, a single thread performance is now limited because clock speed can't go up beyond a point. If you further increase the clock, okay, so single thread performance is limited because of this clock speed. Both are flattening. Power consumption is also, we can see, is kind of flat now. We can't go beyond, say, 250 or something, or 300 watts. However, the bottom curve that we see is that going up. It means the number of cores are going up now. Okay, we are reaching almost like 30, 40, 50 cores in a chipset. Okay, and a core looks something like this. This is a modern microprocessor. It has 6 cores. Okay, now when we see core, it's essentially a processor. Okay, and then however, a lot of things are common across this. For example, cache, L3 cache, level 3 cache is shared, memory controller is shared, IO is shared. So we'll discuss this architecture little later. Idea is that now we are moving towards multiple core, and number of cores are going to go up. Okay, another, this released just few days back. This is called the Tiger Lake processor. It is also quad core. It's not very clear in this diagram what are the cores here. I think this should be a core. I don't know. We'll have to really see. And there is also concept of GPU, graphic processor unit. Okay, sometimes we call them accelerator. Okay, we will study in brief why do we need accelerators. Okay, because if these kind of functions, if we do it in main CPU or main processor, then it will consume a lot of time, and it can be very efficiently done in a coprocessor. So this is NVIDIA's GPU called Tesla P100. Okay, I'm sorry. How many cores it has? There are 3584 cores. That's interesting, right? How does it work? So we'll study GPU, we'll look at some of these designs. Okay, to summarize the class in next 2 minutes, Moore's law is still applicable. Okay, more transistors getting packed in a chipset. There's no free lunch for programmers anymore because integration is hitting power wall. Power wall is kind of power limit that we have discussed, right? Power consumed is basically summation of dynamic power, static power. Dynamic power is approximated as, just forget about N here, is capacitance V square, the supply voltage square, times frequency and A, and frequency depends on supply voltage, so we can say is V cube, C times V cube times activity factor. Similarly, static power is approximated as V times E raised power minus Vt. Essentially is a leakage current. Okay, so because of heating constraints and power constraints, we cannot accommodate more transistor in the processor because there will be more heat, and voltage is now reduced to almost 1 volt or 0.8 volt or 0.9 volts, around in that range. Frequency can be manipulated.